I'm calling to order this hearing. This is a public hearing of the Committee of the Whole of the Council of the District of Columbia. I'm Phil Mendelson, Chair of the Council and Chair of the Committee of the Whole. Today is Friday, July 12th, 2024. Time is 9:38 in the morning. This hearing is being held in room 412 of the John A. Wilson Building. The subject of this morning's hearing is, I believe, 9. We'll find out. I'll rattle them off. 9 bills that have been introduced by council members or the mayor at the request of the mayor that would designate symbolically or officially different roads, alleys, buildings in the city. And I'll go through each one of them in turn. The record in this matter will be open for 2 weeks. That is, it will close at 5 o'clock on Friday, July 26th, 2024. We're required to file a record, and the record will consist of that testimony and letters and comments that we receive on these different measures. The first bill is Bill 25-613, Haynes Way Designation Act of 2023. This bill was introduced December 1st last year by Councilmember Vince Gray, and it would symbolically designate a portion of the public alley system within Square 1071 as Canes Way. Square 1071 is bounded by 15th Street, East Capitol Street, 16th Street, and A Street in Southeast. The second bill is Bill 25-743. It was introduced on March 4th of this year by me. This bill would symbolically designate a portion of the public alley system within Square. Wrong. All right, I've switched up. I have the wrong one here. Let's try this. Would symbolically designate the alley system that runs between 16th Street and L Street as Alexei Navalny Way. It happens that this alley is to the north and east of the Russian embassy. And this is Square 197. So much for my best efforts here. The next the next bill is Bill 25-748, entitled Joseph P. Yeldell Plaza Designation Act of 2024, introduced on March 14th of this year by Councilmember Janice Lewis George. And this measure would, this is really better, but it's harder to follow. I'm struggling. Would symbolically designate the 8100 block of 16th Street Northwest, the 1600 block of North Portal Drive Northwest, and the 8300 block of Eastern Avenue Northwest as Joseph P. Yeldell Plaza. The next measure is Bill 25-794, entitled the Avanti Court Designation Act of 2024. This bill was introduced on April 22nd this year by Councilmember Brianne Nadeau. And this bill would officially designate the public alley system in Square 2863 as Avanti Court. Square 2863 is bounded by Euclid Street, Fairmount Street, Sherman Avenue, and 11th Street Northwest. The next measure is Bill 25-812. It's introduced on May 6th of this year by Councilmember Trayon White. And this bill would officially designate the public alley system within Square 6153 as Ida B. Wells Alley. There's a little concern here because this is a duplicate, as in there's already something else named after Ida B. Wells. It's a middle school or in Ward 4. The next measure is Bill 25-828, entitled Alma Thomas Way Designation Act of 2024. This bill was co-introduced by council members Christina Henderson and Brooke Pinto on May 24th of this year. And this bill would symbolically designate 15th Street between Church and Q Street Northwest as Alma Thomas Way. The next measure is Bill 25-829, entitled the Zelda Fitchandler Way Designation Act 2024, was introduced on May 28th of this year by Councilmember Charles Allen. This bill would symbolically designate 6th Street Southwest between M and the northern boundary of Square 472, Lot 129, as Zelda Fitchandler Way. The next measure is Pearl B. Settles Way, Designation Act of 2024. This bill was introduced by council members Vince Gray, Christina Henderson, and Matt Fruman on May 28th of this year. And this bill would symbolically designate 37th Place Southeast as Pearl B. Settles Way. The next measure is Bill 25-841. This bill was introduced at the request of the mayor on June 6th of this year. And it would officially designate the Park and Recreation Center located in Lot 105 and Square 3128 as Reservoir Park Recreation Center. This is part of what used to be, or maybe still is known as the McMillan Sand Filtration Plant site. Official designations, which several of these are, enables the placement of addresses, related signage, or possible development. That's actually where it's an official designation of a alley or street. Well, I'll say alley. The streets already allow for that. Or with regard to the recreation center, an official designation means that that would be the name of that facility. So sorry, I sort of struggled through that a little bit, but these are the measures that we'll be considering today, and I believe in the order I just listed them. Again, the record will be open for 2 weeks, so we'll close at 5 p.m. on Friday, July 26th. And for the bills that meet the requirements of the law and for which there is not controversy identified through this public hearing process, we plan to mark them up over the course of the fall for the council to consider. With that, managed to screw up King's Way. No, Nevada Way. All right. So let's begin with King's Way Designation Act. According to the witness list, we do not have any witnesses for that. The bill was introduced, as I said already, on December 1st by Councilmember Vince Gray. So we'll turn to the next, which is Bill 25-743, Alexei Navalny Way Designation Act. I have on the witness list Robert Vincent Branham. I understand he may be testifying on some other measures. Are you here?
Yes, I am here.
Excellent. Why don't you proceed? And I'll give you, well, we should put all the witnesses on clocks, but we don't have that many. So why don't you just proceed? And if you're talking about other bills as well, please do that.
Thank you, sir. Greetings and salutations. And with your consent, I will present my testimony on 4 bills at one time. I appear before this committee to support Bill 25-743, the Alexei Navalny Way Designation Act of 2024, Bill 25-812, the Ida B. Wells Alley Designation Act of 2024, Bill 828 Alma Thomas Way, Designation Act of 2024, the other renaming bills. However, I am opposed to Bill 25841, Reservoir Park Recreation Center Designation Act of 24. Mr. Chairman, like you, members of this council, and residents of the District of Columbia, I recognize the great weight placed on symbols of honor as reflections of principles and values. These ceremonial street namings serve to remind us the importance of joining the noble, honorable, and collective struggle against hate, discrimination, racism, bigotry, and sexism. Each designee in his or her own right stood firm in the face of oppression and indignity to receive a legacy worthy of honor. Whether in the District of Columbia, across America, or across the world, evil advanced by political oppression must be stared down and resisted. Decent people must not be afraid to fight back against discrimination, racism, bigotry, and sexism. There must not be a hiding place for policies, practices, and beliefs against dignity, decency, and humanity. Those who will travel these proposed newly named streets will know those who fought the good fight shall be honored and remembered. What is being said by citizens of the District of Columbia is thank you. On Bill 25-841, Reservoir Park Recreation Center Designation Act of 2024, I speak in opposition because it does not come with community support nor a convincing justification. Both ANC 5E and the Bloomingdale Civic Association have come out in opposition to this designation, and it will not, and it's not because they support racism, bigotry, or discrimination. As for me, I am an ardent opponent of racism, bigotry, and discrimination. I take a backseat to no one in the fight to overcome this evil trio. Although there will be mention of the district's values to stand against discrimination, the argument does not come with clean hands and consistent application. It is implausible not to keep the name Macmillan on the building, yet keep the name for the ground of the site. Let me be clear. I am opposed to naming streets, designating government buildings, or erecting statues to racists and to bigots. At this present moment, it is unclear to me which historical Macmillan is at question. Senator Macmillan from Michigan or Congressman Macmillan from South Carolina, although the Reservoir Park is specifically named for James Macmillan from Michigan. If the redesignation were to symbolize great district government resolve in opposition to discrimination, racism, and bigotry, there should have been a greater district outreach and public notice to include residents in the redesignation process. In closing, I am not wedded to the name Macmillan. However, I am wedded to non-discrimination. I am wedded to opposing racism. I am wedded to fighting bigotry. Yet I am also sternly wedded to respect. I thank you, and I am available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Branham. I don't have a copy of your statement. Will you please provide it? So I see you now. You were not visible before, but I can't hear you now. You're still maybe muted.
You don't want me to start over and redo it, do you?
No, we heard you. We didn't see you, but we heard you. Now I see you and hear you, which is a beautiful thing. And I saw your niece, I think, the other day.
Yes, my sweetheart, my sweetheart. I won't give her that. She's wonderful.
So did you say yes, you'll provide your statement?
Yes, I will.
Okay. Now, you're testifying in support of Alexei Navalny Way.
Yes.
You didn't really speak to that.
Yes.
And you're testifying in support of IW Wells Alley Designation Act, although you didn't really speak to that. And you're in support of the Alma Thomas Way, although you also didn't speak to that.
I
And
did
you're,
speak, I spoke to them in under the frame that they were fighters for justice and they should be honored in this manner. So I
okay,
specifically, that was how I addressed the issue.
okay,
Since they all preceded my life and I did not know them well, except for I had no meeting with Mr. Navalny, but I respect his work.
okay. So, but you're in support Fighters for Justice. I'm writing that down. With regard to Reservoir Park, you spoke about McMillan
Yes,
and the bill that's before us would name the rec center Reservoir Park. It
correct.
doesn't name it after McMillan, but you are opposed to naming it Reservoir Park.
I'm opposed to the process and the by which this redesignation was done. I'm not better to the name Macmillan, to the name Macmillan, but I do feel that ANC 5E and the Bloomingdale Civic Association weighed in on this after it wasn't even presented to in a formal way. They just found out about it and requested that the name be honoring maintained for Macmillan to represent that as relevant recreational opportunity for residents citywide. However, I'm not better to name McMillan, but I do think the argument that some have made that Senator McMillan was a bigot, a racist, and the like may have his reputation confused with the McMillan from South Carolina. I have not been able to find anything specific to the senator from from Michigan. It may be there. I just have not seen it. But I have seen a lot of it attributed to the Congressman McMillan from South Carolina. So, the process will move forward. I just feel that the next time that the city will come to the residents and hear what they have to say before they do this and not come from the back door. And when they come and they want to use the argument of opposing racism, bigotry, and discrimination, that it comes with clean hands. You have people in this administration who are being supported, uh, who are accused of being discriminatory and sexual harassment themselves. And the government is quiet on that. So if we're going to do this cleanly, we do it everywhere or not at all.
A fair point. Let me say a couple things. One is we did some research on the senator from Michigan, and we could not find anything that stood out as sordid with regard to racism. He, I believe, was involved in business that supported the North in the Civil War. As a senator, his legacy is about planning for the city. And he was not associated with any of the racist acts or laws or federal policies, was not associated with any of that. And it had not occurred to me, but maybe there is confusion with the Southern congressman who was not a friend of the district and certainly not a friend of the residents of the district, and stood in the way of our getting anything close to home rule for many, many years. I want to say something else. The mayor had sent down the Reservoir Park Recreation Center designation as emergency legislation beginning of June, and I took the extraordinary but not unprecedented act of referring it to committee because it is our practice that we do not name things on an emergency basis without having gone through some sort of a public process. And so now we have the hearing today, but it's my understanding that this legislation was sent to the council. Give me a second. Like maybe 2 days before the mayor had scheduled a ceremony to open the center. And it doesn't sit well with the council that the council is considered an afterthought in this process. And I am aware that the community has been considering other names and, or at least considering considering names other than Reservoir. So, at any rate, that's why we're having this hearing. I don't know if you want to add anything, Mr.
The
Banner?
only thing I would add is that, I would follow up with your concerns on the timing. The mayor's office could have submitted or come to the community and said, this is what our intent is. But there was no rush to rename the building. That process could have taken some time, could have been more inclusive, particularly when you use the moniker of the negativeness of someone's reputation. It needs to be crisp, clear, and consistent, and concise, and above confusion. Here, as you said, I've not been able to find the kind of level that this administration is leveled against on the senator from Macmillan, when it would be more appropriately against the congressman from South Carolina, and not the senator from Michigan, although both were Republicans, which probably is value enough not to name. But the historical.
Well, hold on. I think the congressman was a Democrat. He was a Southern
Yeah.
Democrat.
Okay. Then I
Remember
stand
the infamous
corrected?
Southern Democrats?
Yes, he was
And,
one of those mighty Dixiecrats.
and the senator was one of those, I'm going to say Reconstruction Republicans,
Yes.
which was okay. Don't forget
Philosophy
to,
parties have reversed over time.
correct. So don't forget to send us your statement.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And my niece gives her blessings.
Oh, good. Thank you. I'm going to move to the next bill. The Joseph P. Yeldell Plaza Designation Act of 2024, Bill 25-748. We do not have any witnesses signed up for that. That bill was introduced by Councilmember Janice Lewis George. Yeah, I'm looking at the map, which covers Sixteenth Street, North Portal, Portal Drive, North Portal Drive. Let me see, covers 8100 block of 16th Street, 1600 block of North Portal Drive, and the 8200 block of Eastern Avenue. We usually don't do things quite that way. I'm going to move Avanti Court Designation Act of 2024. There are two witnesses, Meredith Moldenauer and Amy Levin. Are they here? And I have a resolution in support from ANC 1B. Ms. Moldenauer, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Why don't you proceed? And good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Mendelson, members of the council. My name is Meredith Moldenhau with the law firm Cozen O'Connor. I'm here today to testify in favor of Bill 25-794, the Avanti Court Designation Act of 2024, on behalf of Girl Built LLC, a local developer and owner of property located at 1021 to 1027 Euclid Street Northwest, located in Square 2863, Lot 84. We reached out to the ANC 1B back in March of 2023 and proposed naming the alley in Square 2863. Over the course of the next 4 months, the ANC and community members suggested and discussed various potential names for the alley. Ultimately, the community, through ANC 1B, chose to support naming the alley Avanti Court after the acclaimed opera singer and DC native Lillian Avanti. Not only was Lillian Avanti an accomplished and inspirational figure, but she also lived within the boundaries of ANC 1B, where the alley is located. As such, we urge the Committee of the Whole to vote to pass the Avanti Court Designation Act in honor of the life and legacy of Lillian Avanti. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Amy Levin, is she here? Ms. Moldenauer, so you are testifying on behalf of a developer. That says to me that the interior lot who is going to be developed.
That would be the intent, yes.
Can you describe what that development will look like?
The zoning would require it to either be single family or other permitted uses within an alley, and so that would be the intent.
Has this gone through zoning approvals yet?
No, it has not.
Okay. And is the community aware of what the development plans are?
Yes, we've had many meetings discussing potential here.
The proposal is to name the entire alley system within the square Avanti Court?
Correct. Yes, there is a large center alley network of alley properties, and this would be to name the alley network surrounding it.
I'm sorry, say that again?
There's a large center which with an alley that goes through and then around, and the intent would be to name the entire alley network.
Okay. Give me a second. Thank you, Ms. Moldenauer. I don't have any other questions for you. Thank you. The next measure is Ida B. Wells Alley Designation Act. This was introduced by Councilmember Trayon White, and there are no witnesses other than Robert Vincent Branham, who's already testified. The next measure is Bill 25-828, entitled Alma Thomas Way Designation Act. This is a symbolic designation. Again, the only witness is Robert Vincent Branham, who's already testified. So we'll turn to the next measure, which is Zelda Fitzhandler Way Designation Act, Bill 25-829. I have two witnesses listed, Gail Fast, who's a ANC commissioner from ANC 6D, and Allison Irvin, who is chief of staff at Arena Stage. Are they both here? Commissioner Fast, do you want to go first?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Chairman Mendelson, and thank you for holding today's hearing. My name is Gail Fast, ANC 60 Commissioner, whose single-member district, the Arena Stage, is located. I am here today to lend my support to Bill 25-829, Zelda Fitzhandler Way Designation Act of 2024. Zelda Fitzhandler, the co-founder and producing director of the Arena Stage from 1950 to 1990, is widely regarded as the matriarch of America's regional theaters. With her husband, Tom Fitzhandler, and drama teacher Edward Magnum, they founded the Arena Stage, Washington, D.C.'s first integrated theater. During her tenure, the Arena Stage went on to become the first regional theater to transfer a production to Broadway and the first theater to receive the Regional Theater Tony Award. Through Zelda Fitzhandler's leadership, the Arena Stage extended its horizons by bringing to the stage plays by Samuel Beckett, Tennessee Williams, and George Bernard Shaw, to name a few. The actors she nurtured in Arena's repertory company included George Grizzard, Pernell Roberts, Jane Alexander, Robert Prosky, Diane Wiest, and James Earl Jones, who starred in the Arena's premiere of Howard Sackler's politically charged boxing melodrama, The Great White Hope. Through her leadership, the Arena Stage extended its horizons by implementing groundbreaking policies and programs while continuing to promote diversity in all aspects of the theater. In December 1997, President Clinton awarded her a National Medal of the Arts, the country's highest award for work in the arts. And in 1998, she was inducted into the Theater Hall of Fame, the first person outside of New York to be elected. And in 1976, the New York Commercial Theater Award awarded her and the Arena Stage its highest honor, the Antoinette Perry Tony Award, the first to be given to a company outside of New York. So it seems fitting that the next act is to rename the 1100 block of 6th Street Southwest Zelda Fick-Chandler Way on the 100th anniversary of her birth in recognition of her legacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Ms. Irvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding today's hearing, and I'm happy to say that some of my remarks may reiterate what our Commissioner Fast already said. I'm Allison Irvin, Chief of Staff at Arena Stage. Arena Stage was one of the first not-for-profit theaters in the U.S. and a pioneer of the regional theater movement. Since our founding in 1950 by Zelda Fick-Chandler, Thomas Fick-Chandler, and Edward Mangum, Arena Stage has taken a leadership role in extending theater's horizons, implementing groundbreaking policies and programs, and promoting diversity in all aspects of theater, from theater going to production. Arena was the first racially integrated theater in Washington, D.C., the first regional theater to transfer a production to Broadway, and the first to receive the Regional Theater Tony Award in 1976. Zelda Fick-Chandler's impact on American theater is deep and immense. She was not only a leader in the Washington, D.C. arts and theater community, she was a national leader. Not only because Arena was one of the first not-for-profit theaters outside New York, but also through her many years leading the MFA acting program at New York University. Zelda led Arena for 40 years with, quoting her bio, plays with conscience as well as artistic sensibility, and strove to create a vital tension between new works and works from earlier generations that speak to current times. Arena continues today among a field of thousands of producing theaters around the country. In 1985, Zelda was awarded the John Houseman Award for commitment and dedication to the development of young American actors, the Commonwealth Award for Distinguished Service in Dramatic Arts, and the Margot Jones Award for development of new work. In December 1997, President Clinton awarded her a National Medal of the Arts, the country's highest award for work in the arts. And in 1998, she was inducted into the Theater Hall of Fame, the first person outside New York to be elected. In 2009, the Stage Directors and Choreographers Foundation established the Zelda Fick-Chandler Award to honor a director or choreographer each year for accomplishments and future promise in regions outside of New York. Zelda's intellect and artistry have recently been commemorated with 2 books published this spring, one a compilation of written words and the other an oral history told by those that knew her and were impacted by her. 2024 is the 100th anniversary of Zelda's birth, and we would be so honored to call the block of 6th Street where Arena Stage is Zelda Fick-Chandler Way in recognition of her legacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Irvin. A couple of questions. The legislation proposes to designate 6th Street north of M to the northern boundary of Lot 129 in Square 472. And I'm guessing that Lot 129 is the lot that Arena Stage sits on. Do you know?
Yes, that's correct.
The map that I have shows the designation going up to, I believe it's K Street. Would that be the same, or is that a little bit farther to the north?
It's a little bit further to the north. It finishes the block.
And thank you for speaking up. Do any of us care whether, no, that's fine. Do any of us care whether it is the northern boundary of the lot or K Street? All right, everybody's muted, maybe not. Commissioner, do you care?
No, I don't care.
And Ms. Irvin?
No, we have no preference.
All right, that gives us something to ponder. The other thing, which is not very critical, but Ms. Irvin, in your statement, you said that the Arena was one of the first not-for-profit theaters outside New York. I grew up in Cleveland, where we have the Cleveland Playhouse, which I think has been around since the 1920s.
The designation there is not for profit. It was a different business model to have. There were professional theaters that were often roadhouses that did tours or presented tours of Broadway shows. So the not-for-profit model was to have self-produced plays that did not come from outside the area, but came from inside the area.
Okay. On what basis do you say that Arena was one of the first?
Around that same time, there were 3 notable theaters that began around the same time, one in Houston, one in Dallas, and then Arena in Washington, D.C. And they all began in the late 40s. So we don't try to claim that any one of them was the first. That's why we say that we were one of the first with the actual founding in
Okay.
1950.
Are you familiar with Cleveland Playhouse?
Yes,
And
a bit.
Is that not-for-profit?
It is now.
And you think it wasn't then?
It had not been for its entire history.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Not for its entire history.
Interesting. Okay, and some of the others, like what comes to mind is Guthrie. Is that not for profit?
It is, and it actually followed Arena a few years later.
Okay, see, I'm learning something here. All right, thank you. Let me just see, do we have any other questions? Thank you. Thank you, each of you, for your testimony. We will turn
Thank
now to Bill 25-830, Pearl B. Settles Way Designation Act. And we have one witness, Mr. Cotton. Come forward. I always like it when witnesses are in person.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, good morning. Thank you. Again, I want to come before the council, Councilman Mendelson and the committee of the whole. My name is John F. Cotton, and I'm a lifelong Washingtonian. It is with great pride that I present before you testimony for the ceremonial designation of the 200 block of 37 Place Southeast, Washington, D.C. as the Pearl B. Settle Way in recognition of Ms. Pearl's unswerving commitment to the service of the residents of the District of Columbia in general and the Star Terrace community in particular. Ms. Pearl, as she is affectionately known to thousands of residents of the community that have benefited from her numerous acts of kindness and generosity, and couldn't find a better way to honor Ms. Pearl's legacy and lifelong commitment to the District of Columbia and the Star Terrace community, which comes from the full support of 7F Advisory Neighborhood Commission and the 7F06 Commissioner, Ms. Frida Edwards. Below is a brief biography of Ms. Pearl Settles and some of the outstanding accomplishments that made her more than deserving of this designation and sense of pride that it brings to the community. Ms. Pearl Settles, a lifelong Washingtonian, reared her 11 children in Southwest, Northwest, and Southeast DC, all of whom have dedicated volunteer service in different capacities throughout their lives. Ms. Pearl is committed to her family and the community. While a resident in the Star Terrace housing projects, Ms. Settles served the community until her death in 1986. As such, she was elected resident council member, advisory neighborhood commissioner for 7F01, and sat on the District of Columbia Housing Authority Board with such notables as Ms. Gray, Ms. London, and Ms. Phoebe Scott, as well as others. During her time as a representative, Ms. Settles became known throughout the community by leading and supporting affordable daycare in the community workshops. She facilitated employment opportunities for residents. She helped with food distribution for the needy. She held cleanup and campaigns in the neighborhood, participated and conducted regularly community meetings, became a mother figure to the children who needed direction, coordinated community block parties, planned and took annual committee and family trips, gave out food basket during the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, established a 37 Place resident, Miss Lillian Brown, a vacation Bible school for children and adults during the summertime school breaks. She fostered a low crime rate in the neighborhood due to community involvement and intervention with potential criminals or criminal acts. Anything that the council can do to move this act forward and make this dream a reality will be greatly appreciated by the Suttles family, the Starter Terrace residents, both past and present, and myself, who stand as an example of the lasting impact Ms. Pearl had on the entire community. If you have any questions or concerns, you could please feel free to reach out to me by using the information that I have provided in my testimony. Thank you in advance for your expedient attention to this matter, and I respectfully submit it to the council.
Thank you, Mr. Cotton. Your testimony is helpful. You mentioned that she was helpful to you, example of lasting, you are an example of the lasting impact. You want to say a little bit
Yes.
more?
Yes, well, of course, as myself, my name is John Cotton again. I do a lot of volunteer work in this city. My mother as well, Miss Rosita Cotton and Miss Pearl Settles was great friends, and watching them do things throughout the community and the volunteer effort as such as the cleanup campaigns and providing community trips for kids to go to inspired me to the level of community service that I do among this city. I'm quite sure I stood in front of you in many capacities, whether it was as a volunteer representative supporting the rink, volunteering in DC Parks and Recreation as a coach and mentor over in the Rosedale Recreation Center, just being an advocate for all things Ward 7, with the Alumni Association, working with the school HD Woodson that I've attended as well, anything that commits public service to this. And we have been, of course, through my fraternity, Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, we have done a lot of community service as well, doing some of the things that she mentioned on this basket, having a night out where we are feeding the homeless through the winter time, as well as giving out Thanksgiving baskets and things of that nature. So my service and to the city in the volunteer matter was partially inspired by the work of Ms. Pearl Settles and our public housing complex.
Thank you. Thank you for the testimony, and thank you for being here.
All right.
It's very helpful. So you're excused, and I'm going to move on to the next bill.
Okay, then thank you.
The next bill is Bill 25-841, entitled Reservoir Park Recreation Center Designation Act of 2024. Mr. Branham already testified. We have Kirby Vining, Betsy McDaniel, and Joe Levesque. Mr. Levesque needs to accept. He's in the virtual and in the waiting room. Okay. Mr. Levesque, I hope you heard me say that you need to accept so that we can admit you. Mr. Vining.
I submitted my written testimony, but in the interest of trying to keep this to 4 minutes or under, I was going to not read 2 paragraphs. Shall I skip those 2 paragraphs?
Timing, we're fine. If you get to like 10 or 15 minutes and I fall off my chair,
All right,
then
thank
it's a
you.
problem. But
Coffee
otherwise-
is available. So the McMillan Advisory Group, or MAG, was formed in 2007 to represent residents' concerns as they relate to the development of the McMillan sand filtration site. I'm Kirby Vining, currently MAG Chair, also serving as ANC 5E06 and as an officer in the Stronghold Civic Association, but speaking today solely on behalf of the MAG and its letter dated May 16th. I'd like to point out that the MAG is a coalition of 18 community and civic organizations, which is, I think, the largest coalition of civic organizations other than possibly the Federal Federation of Civic Associations, representatives from those 18 organizations.
What does MAG stand for again?
McMillan Advisory Group.
Okay.
On May 13th, the MAG received from the Department of General Services via the ANC 5E. The McMillan site is located entirely in ANC 5E05. Proposed legislation naming the new recreation center Reservoir Park Recreation Center. And this was noticed to the MAG membership for discussion at its May 16th monthly meeting. At that meeting, the proposed name was discussed and the MAG membership voted to respond to this proposed legislation with the attached letter recommending that the name McMillan Park Recreation Center would be better for the reasons stated in that letter. There's a copy of the letter at the end of my testimony. Meeting participants were puzzled, thinking that local consensus is that the site already has a name, McMillan, by which it has been referred to throughout history without any known objection, and is even in the name of the development partnership, Vision McMillan Partners. This MAG letter was presented to the ANC 5E for presentation to the Department of General Services, the Stronghold and Bloomingdale Civic Associations, and ANC 5E subsequently passed resolutions in support of that letter. But I'm here in my MAG capacity because we originated the letter. The votes at those 4 organizations were near unanimous. Of all 4 organizations, there was 1 abstention and 1 nay. This is really remarkable, as you certainly know well, to get unanimity or close to unanimity in anything. On June 1st, several members of the administration called ANC 5E commissioners to a Zoom meeting in which they took issue with the MAG's recommended name for the rec center that the ANC had expressed support for, arguing speciously that Senator James McMillan of Michigan was a racist and did not represent DC values. ANC 5E replied by asking why the ANC was asked about this name in legislation if the community response was to be ignored. On June 14th, the Ward 5 council member engaged in an email exchange with some of the ANC commissioners and members of one of the civic associations that had voted to endorse the name McMillan Park Recreation Center, making the same argument based on the same DGS documentation of the alleged racist background of Senator McMillan. The administration's proposed name was revealed only weeks before the rec center opened, notwithstanding MAG questions for years about when the center would open and what its name would be. The allegations against Senator McMillan were first heard after the ANC voted to support the MAG letter and are clearly a red herring to divert attention from the primary point, which is administration interest in having the rec center name harmonized with the name of the adjacent townhouse development Reservoir District. That development is on privately owned land and the developer is free to name it whatever it wishes. The rec center is on some of the little land remaining in city hands, not sold to the development partnership, and has always been uncontroversially known as McMillan. So this naming controversy is the contrived invention of the administration to both align the rec center name with that of the adjacent development and keep the McMillan name, the historical name, out of it. But there was no such controversy until after the MAG's May 16th letter that was supported by the ANC. The voice of the community has been raised and the administration doesn't like what it hears, thus the contrived controversy, and the city is thereby oddly asserting Bethesda values over DC values. At the June 20th McMillan Advisory Group meeting, these facts were all discussed: endorsement of the MAG letter by the ANC and 2 civic associations, and attempts to dissuade the ANC from its position by both the administration team and the Ward 5 council member. The MAG voted at that June 20th meeting to make a statement to the council at its July 12th meeting today, considering this bill, and reassert the community's expressed wish that the new rec center be named McMillan Park Recreation Center instead of the administration's proposed name. This statement is a result of that June 20th MAG meeting and vote. Without going into an unnecessary level of detail and history, this community has always referred to the site as McMillan, regardless of individual views for or against the development, or even neutral on the development. All documents submitted for and against the development in all public hearings since 1989 refer to the site as McMillan, without any comment or controversy about the name being inappropriate in any sense. I do not ever recall hearing any derogatory comment about the association of the name McMillan with the site in almost 40 years living just across the street from it. The common and general feeling is it's just the name of the place. The site was named in 1906 by then Secretary of War William Howard Taft after McMillan's sudden death in 1902. Taft stated that the basis for his selection of McMillan's name for the entire site, including the Reservoir Park and water treatment facility, was because of the indispensable work of Senator McMillan in pushing for approval of budgets and plans for the facility against hefty opposition in Congress This is built entirely by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which is directly under Taft's control and supervision as Secretary of War. Taft commented further that plans and construction would have collapsed and failed were it not for Senator McMillan's push for approvals, resulting in Washington's first safe, drinkable public water supply system, eliminating the scourge of typhoid that ravaged this city previously. The Department of General Services screed against the McMillan name as a weak, disingenuous distraction intended solely to give the rec center a name more pleasing to the developer than to the community, and it makes more dollars than cents. It seems fitting thus to us on the MAG, and we hope to you as well, that it is entirely appropriate for this public rec center built on one of the few remaining sections of the site that are still DC property and not sold to developers to retain the name McMillan in its name. The rec center is ours, and it would be fitting that the community's preference in the name of the rec center should prevail over a name similar to that chosen by a Bethesda developer for its new townhouses adjacent to the site. And I close with noticing the coincidence that you also have a Lillian Avanti honorary naming there, and one of the most famous pictures that I've ever seen of the McMillan Fountain at its original location is of Lillian Avanti with her son. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vernon. Betsy McDaniel, I believe, is not here. Joe Levesque. Still needs to accept. It's declining. How do you decline? Yeah, it's easier for some folks to participate when they have the virtual option, but then we sit here and wait while they log on. Mr. Levesque, you are up. If you are speaking, you are muted. And we can't see you.
Can you hear me?
I can see and hear you. It's a beautiful thing.
Very much. I appreciate that. Yes, I'm a senior citizen and I have difficulty with these sometimes. I'm here to testify to request a postponement of the consideration of the bill 250841 due to the insufficient justification that DGS has provided to not use the name McMillan. And I wholeheartedly endorse the testimony of chairman of the MAG currently, and I'm also on the MAG. I represent Bloomingdale, one of two. And I'm also on the board of the BCA, Bloomingdale Civics Association. First, I'd like to outline a few of the accomplishments that Senator McMillan initiated to improve the health and safety of the Washington, D.C. residents and the surrounding area. And you're probably well aware of these, but I'd just like to point them out. We have the look and the feel of the National Mall is what the McMillan plan gave us. Of course, the sanitation plant, Rock Creek Park, the location of Union Station, George Washington Memorial, countless parks throughout the city and rec centers to provide green space for the residents. Senator McMillan really cared about the District of Columbia, what it looked like, the quality of life for the residents, and the future feel of the National Mall. And he wanted to provide that monumental look that we enjoy today and all the visitors from throughout the world enjoy. I read the DGS statement, and it doesn't provide any citations where that information came from. It looks like it took some votes, mentioned some votes, and any vote can be twisted. Namely, I guess he did not want or supported not allowing lepers into the United States. Well, we're still doing things like that when people have Ebola and recently HIV, you couldn't enter the United States. So things like that were just, it's unbelievable. They included that kind of information and not even giving citations for anything at all. I'm also very concerned with the process. I just think it was very unfair to the community, given the fact, as Kirby mentioned, that it was unanimously voted by the BCA and almost unanimous by the ANC. I've lived here for 38 years. I'm one of 3 people that actually opened McMillan in 1989 to be used as a park for one day. Council member Harry Thomas provided some funding for that, and the people enjoyed it. We had to actually buy a $500,000 insurance policy for that one day, so no one fell through the manhole covers and was injured. But now we have the park, and we would never have thought that it would be named anything other than McMillan Park. I'll always refer to it McMillan, no matter what the name is. I just think naming it Reservoir Park insinuates that it is part of the EYA buildings up there. And I think it should be completely disconnected, because that's a DC park, and that's also in the condos and townhouses. That's all private development. If you're not going to use the name Senator McMillan in that naming of the park, you could at least use Bloomingdale, but I advocate using Senator McMillan. So other than that, I think that that's about all I have to say. But I do hope that you vote no on this, and that you at least require DGS to provide more information about where these suggestions come from. But I don't feel that he was a racist. It could change my mind, but I just don't see that information anywhere. And like I said, you could take a vote, and there's a lot of things in bills that someone does not like, but they pass the bill because there's something in there they really want. So, and you know, being a politician, know better than I do that someone can twist your vote to make it sound like you were anti-something or racist or whatever it is, and you never were. You just get on that. So thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And I don't have a copy of your statement. Can you provide that?
Yes, I will. I'm sorry that I was a little busy yesterday with the ceremonial street naming for Jesse Mitchell Way on W Street, which is actually the home. I live in his home that he lived in back in the 30s and 40s.
Yes, that's
And,
right. You testified before us a couple of months ago.
You have
Yes,
an
I
excellent
was
memory.
unaware of that ceremony. At least I think I was. I had hearings yesterday, so it might be that I was notified and I couldn't attend. But was it a good ceremony?
There was a ceremony, and Zachary Parker was there, but he had to leave also very quickly because he had introduced the bill and he had to testify for that bill. So it was a wonderful ceremony. The family came over. We allowed them into our home, invited them into our home, and they were just they got to see where he lived, the family. It was a multi-generational home, 3 generations actually. And one of the the grandchild of Jesse Mitchell actually lived in the home, and she was telling us lots of stories about the neighborhood, the home, and how busy Jesse Mitchell was. And he'd come home late at night from working all day at the bank, and there was always a dinner ready at maybe 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock that his wife Beatrice had prepared. And she said, I just don't remember seeing him very much because he was always so busy running a bank.
Do you have a copy of this DGS memo or whatever?
I do. I'd have to look that up, but I know Kirby probably also has that. I would just.
Does he have it? Mr. Vining, do you have it?
I have a hard copy. I'd be glad to give you. It's online there, but it's
Absolutely. Give it to Mr. Cash.
And everything that's said in there, you really have to take it with a grain of salt because there's no citations at all. And you could clip any little statement out of a bigger statement, and it just doesn't sound good.
Mr. Vining, do you need this back? Thank you. And what you have, Mr. Levesque, is the same as what Mr. Vining gave me. It's one page.
I believe, yes, yes, that's correct.
Okay,
Probably
thank you.
so.
Let me see if I have any other questions. So what I'm hearing from both of you, you would prefer to keep the name McMillan.
To be
Correct.
clear, what you have before you, it's a bill naming the place, Reservoir Park Recreation Center. In fact, what I think that we're both saying, and I think Mr. Branham as well, is just change the name of that bill to designate it McMillan Park Recreation Center. If you would do that, or if that, I don't know if that would require a separate introduction of a new bill, or if it's a matter that the council to debate when it comes up in the fall.
Yes. I think my note from Mr. Branham was that he was more clearly in opposition to the process or opposed to the bill because of the process. And I did note to him, so I'll note it again here, that we became aware of this around June 6th, and I think the ceremony opening the park was that weekend. And we don't really take kindly to being jammed like this on naming something. The recreation center was in the planning for a decade perhaps, and the construction was taking place for at least a year. And so there was lots of time for the mayor to submit legislation.
As I mentioned early in my testimony, routinely at the MAG meetings for years after the demolition started, we asked, when is the center going to be open? Because that was the only fully funded project on the entire site. After demolition started, the other parcels were sold off. That was the only fully funded. It was in the DC budget. We were asking, when's it going to start? When's it going to open? What's the name going to be? And it was just silence. And then it was a surprise just a couple of weeks before the ceremony to open the place. We agree that the process was rushed is a diplomatic way.
Thank you. I have no other questions for you all. Thank you. At this point, we're going to turn to government witnesses, and we have two. Thenie Freeman, who is Director of the Department of Parks and Recreation, and Brant Miller, who's Manager of Policy and Legislative Affairs Division, District Department of Transportation. If you could both come forward. Give me a second. I want to just look at something. Let's see. I have Ms. Freeman first. Do you want to go first? Okay, good. Morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman Mendelson, council members and members of the public viewing and joining us today. I am Thanie Mack Freeman, Director of the DC Department of Parks and Recreation. DPR delivers high-quality recreation programs and services to all district residents. We operate an expansive inventory of amenities, including over 80 recreation centers, 36 pools and aquatic centers, and 244 park sites. We are the district's central provider of public playgrounds, athletic fields, spray parks, tennis courts, pickleball courts, dog parks, community gardens, urban farms, and more. DPR's nationally recognized programs and services enhance the health, well-being, and quality of life for every individual we serve. I'm here to testify today regarding Bill 25-841, Reservoir Park Recreation Center Designation Act of 2024. This bill formally names DPR's newest facility, the Reservoir Park Recreation Center. First, I would like to thank Mayor Bowser for her generous support for this fantastic facility with an investment of $137 million in the total project and for her unwavering commitment to the project. In addition, I would like to thank our district government partners, Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, Nina Albert, Department of General Services Director, Delano Hunter, and their staff for their assistance in planning and constructing this unique DPR site. As a director of DPR, I want to speak about the tremendous value the new Reservoir Park Recreation Center brings to district residents and visitors. I am so excited about the site's expansive outdoor amenities, which include over 6 acres of park space, 2 spray parks, a playground, a large grass field, a walking path complete with outdoor fitness equipment, a fully restored historic fountain, and a beautiful outdoor amphitheater space. These unique and valuable outdoor community assets help put the park in the name Reservoir Park Recreation Center. I also want to acknowledge that we, the district government, did not do this alone. For decades, community advocates have pushed for this land to be put to productive use. Mayor Bowser and district government leaders stood arm in arm with these advocates at the facility's ribbon cutting on June 15th. We know the site will be tremendously popular with over 500 residents showing up on a hot Saturday morning to celebrate the grand opening. We look forward to continuing to stay connected as DPR works to activate and program the center to reflect the community's needs and interests. DPR does not have formal naming authority over our facilities. Instead, this power rests with the mayor and the DC Council. However, DPR wishes to express our support for Mayor Bowser's selection of the name Reservoir Park Recreation Center. The Park and Recreation Center are part of the 25-acre site formerly known as the McMillan Sand Filtration Site located at North Capitol and Michigan Avenue. We're delighted to have our newest DPR facility be the first part of what will be known as the Reservoir District, a mixed-use development to include a grocery store, retail, medical facilities, housing, including affordable and senior housing. Naming this facility Reservoir Park Recreation Center, rather than continuing the association with McMillan, is a deliberate effort to disassociate the space from the problematic history of U.S. Senator James McMillan, for whom the McMillan Reservoir was initially named. Senator McMillan's record of racism and exclusion does not align with our district values of diversity and inclusion, and we believe that this is the right moment that we select a new name for this beautiful new community space. While we intend to disconnect from Senator McMillan, we do not want to disconnect from the individuals who see themselves as the McMillan community, who we know remain committed to utilizing the campus for public enjoyment. We wish to remember our history. As many know, the Recreation Center is located in the McMillan Park Reservoir Historic District. The name Reservoir Park derives from the historic connection while creating an opportunity to shape a new identity and legacy for the area and positively reflects our district values. Reservoir reflects the site's long association with the adjacent water reservoir, and park reflects the expansive and dynamic green park space available for community use. When developing the facility, the district government was incredibly intentional about preserving the history and landmarks of the former filtration site. A walking museum around the site will have historic wayfinding with signage that includes the name Macmillan Sand Filtration Plant. In addition, we will continue to find ways to celebrate and uplift the reservoir's important space and place to the surrounding community. And in addition to the expansive outdoor amenities, the Recreation Center also features an indoor pool, fitness center, multi-purpose room, and an art walk and walking museum. We are incredibly excited to add a new indoor pool to our inventory where we can offer aquatic programming for all ages, learn to swim classes, as well as lap lane and leisure swimming. The Reservoir Park Recreation Center pool fills a critical level of service gap in an area with a high demand for indoor pools. As documented in DPR's Ready to Play Master Plan, we look forward to our continued conversations with the surrounding community and the exceptional recreation programs and services we will offer at our location in Ward 5. In conclusion, thank you for the opportunity to testify today regarding Bill 25-841. We are delighted to serve residents at DPR's newest recreation center. We feel strongly that we should carry the name Reservoir Park Recreation Center. We urge the council to vote to approve Bill 25-841, and I am available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Chairman Mendelson, members of the council, staff, and district residents. My name is Brant Miller, manager of the Policy and Legislative Affairs Division at the District Department of Transportation, commonly referred to as DDOT. I am here today to present testimony on behalf of Mayor Muriel Bowser and DDOT Acting Director Sharon Kirschbaum regarding 6 symbolic street naming bills and 2 bills officially naming public alley systems. Bill 25-794, the Avanti Court Designation Act of 2024, Bill 25-812, the Ida B. Wells Alley Designation Act of 2024, Bill 25-613, the Canes Way Designation Act of 2023, Bill 25-743, the Alexei Navalny Way Designation Act of 2024, Bill 25-748, the Joseph P. Yeldell Plaza Designation Act of 2024, Bill 25-828, the Alma Thomas Way Designation Act of 2024, Bill 25-829, the Zelda Fichandler Way Designation Act of 2024, and Bill 25-830, the Pearl B. Settles Way Designation Act of 2024. The stated purpose of Bill 25-749 is to officially designate the public alley system in Square 2863, bounded by Euclid Street, Fairmount Street, Sherman Avenue, and 11th Street Northwest in Ward 1 as Avanti Court. For visualization purposes, I have attached to this testimony a copy of the plat of the designated alley system. DDOT notes that in addition to new signage, this newly designated alley system will require new poles. In fiscal terms, the cost of each installed sign for this designation is approximately $190, $65 for sign fabrication, and $125 for sign installation, and $270 for each new pole installed. Sufficient signage requires 3 total signs and 3 poles. The stated purpose of Bill 25-812 is to officially designate Square 6153, lots 84 and 85, located at 3929 to 3931 4th Street Southeast, close to the intersection of 4th Street Southeast and Atlantic Street Southeast in Ward 8 as Ida B. Wells Alley. Please note, Square 6153 is currently pending development approval, which is necessary to complete the public alley system depicted in this bill. The pending alley designation application in review with the Office of the Surveyor will dedicate 9 feet to public space and expand the existing 15-foot paper alley to a 24-foot wide paved alley. I have attached to this testimony a copy of the plat. Sufficient signage requires 3 total signs and 3 poles. The stated purpose of Bill 25-613 is to symbolically designate public alley system within Square 1071, bounded by 15th Street Southeast, East Capitol Street, 16th Street Southeast, and A Street Southeast as Canes Way. For visualization purposes, I have attached to this testimony a copy of a DDOT generated map highlighting the public alley system described in the bill. Sufficient signage requires 3 total signs and 3 poles. The stated purpose of Bill 25743 is to symbolically designate a portion of the public alley system in Square 197, abutting lots 841, and 820, and 88 as Alexi Mulvaney Way. For visualization purposes, I've attached to this testimony a copy of a DDOT generated map highlighting the public alley system described in the bill. Sufficient signage requires 2 total signs and 2 poles. The stated purpose of Bill 25748 is to symbolically designate the 8100 block of 16th Street Northwest between Eastern Avenue Northwest and Portal Drive Northwest, the 1600 block of North Portal Drive Northwest between Eastern Avenue Northwest and Tamarick Street Northwest, and the 8200 block of Eastern Avenue Northwest between 16th Street Northwest and Portal Drive Northwest as Joseph P. Yeldell Plaza. For visualization purposes, I have attached to this testimony a copy of a DDOT generated map highlighting the blocks described in the bill. Sufficient signage requires 8 signs. The stated purpose of Bill 25828 is to symbolically designate 15th Street Northwest between Church Street Northwest and Q Street Northwest in Ward 2 as Alma Thomas Way. For visualization purposes, I have attached to this testimony a copy of a DDOT generated map highlighting the portion of 15th Street described in the bill. Sufficient signage requires 2 signs. The stated purpose of Bill 25829 is to symbolically designate 6th Street Southwest between M Street and the northern boundary of Square 472, Lot 129 as Zelda Fichandler Way. For visualization purposes, I have attached to this testimony a copy of a DDOT generated map highlighting the portion of 6th Street described in the bill. Sufficient signage requires 3 signs and 1 pole. The stated purpose of Bill 25830 is to symbolically designate the 200 block of 37th Place Southeast as Pearl B. Settles Way. For visualization purposes, I have attached to this testimony a copy of a DDOT generated map highlighting the 200 block of 37th Place Southeast. Sufficient signage requires 1 sign. The total cost for sufficient signage, including poles, for all of these bills is $7,990. DDOT can absorb the cost of these signs and poles within its current budget and does not foresee any operational impacts that these official and symbolic names would have on the district's transportation network. Therefore, the administration has no objection to these street, alley, and public space namings. DDOT stands ready to assist the council and all other stakeholders with any ceremonial unveiling activities that may materialize as a result of these bills being passed. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify before you today. I am available to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. You went through that very quickly, and you also went through it in an order that was different than the bill order.
I
bill numbers.
apologize.
So I was desperately trying to keep up. And as a result, my questions are going to take a minute or 3.
Please always feel at liberty to interrupt me if you need me to adjust.
Well, I'm not sure that would have helped. So let's take Kane's Way. You said 3 signs. That would be at the street entrances to the alley.
That's correct. There are 2 on A Street Southeast and there's 1
One
on
on
East
East
Capitol
Capitol.
Street.
And I was able to look at Alex Navalny, and you say 2 signs for that.
Yes, I
and
believe
that makes
it's,
sense.
yeah, it's 16th and L Street.
I think you've actually already fabricated those signs.
We are always ready to stand by for any
No, we won't
ceremonial
discuss that one any further.
purposes.
Okay, and then Bill 748. Now for that, you said 8 signs. You didn't comment on the fact that this is a little strange. So looking at the map, it would be, is that North Portal and then 16th and then Eastern Avenue?
That's correct.
And you propose 2 on North Portal, which looks like it's a block long. And then 4 on 16th Street, and is that only a block long?
That's correct. Because there's an approach from Portal on either side of 16th and the traffic circle to the north, it looks like there would be a pole with a sign for each of those blocks. So it's 4 blocks that are each bisected. So there's 2 signs on either end of each block.
You said 4 blocks. Did you really mean 4 blocks? It's 2 blocks from Portal to the circle.
It's 3 blocks, but then I believe that 16th sort of veers in a V direction. So at the circle, there would be 2 entrances to 16th. And then at Portal, there's an eastern side and a western side. So I believe there's a sign on either side of Portal as well.
Okay, but there is no intersecting street between Portal and the circle.
Oh, correct. Yes.
All right, and then on Eastern, again, it's just 1 block from Portal to the circle?
Correct.
And the department has no view on whether 3 different streets should be named, have the same symbolic name?
I don't want to opine too much, but I will say that I think plaza designations typically do take up multiple blocks of one area of streets. So since it's a plaza designation, this doesn't raise any red flags.
I'm thinking of the Joe Posel Plaza, which is in Georgetown, which consists of the intersection.
I'm thinking of a different plaza.
Do you know?
Whose name I cannot recall off the top of my head. But I don't think that we have an objection to this taking multiple streets. I'm not sure what occupies the area between the streets. I'm not sure if it's appropriate for the designation of plaza.
Ivanti Court, 794. You said 3, and I don't quite get that. It looks like from the plat, there are 2 entrances off of Euclid.
And then,
And then there's an entrance off of a Fairmont.
correct.
But you would not name any of the intersections within the square? You wouldn't put a sign there?
We certainly could. I think our default would be to where it intersects with a roadway versus another leg of the alley, but it would also, I frankly would depend on the geometry of the alley. There may not be sufficient public space to install a sign. We've had that issue with other alley systems in the past, but we can certainly look into it. And if the community requests one, we can investigate the ability to install more signage within the alley. But according to the plat, yes, it would be every leg of the alley would be renamed.
Every intersection with the street would be named.
Every intersection with the street would have a sign, yes.
Correct.
But the
That's how you
entire
get to
system would be
3.
named.
But all the different segments, because there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 segments, would not necessarily be named. I think you should look at that again.
You don't believe that the entire system is being renamed
No,
with legislation?
I don't believe the 3 signs is sufficient.
Okay, understood.
And Ida B. Wells, which is 812. You said 3 signs? 1580.
Again, this is an example where there are three entrances from the roadway. I will note that this is a paper alley. There is not currently a paved alley here. So the signage count reflects what the plat shows, which is three entrances. As the development takes place, we could, of course, install further signage, as I believe homes will be abutting legs of the alley under the current development plan.
So that square is proposed for development.
Correct. I think in particular, the L-shaped leg of the alley.
But it's entirely a paper alley or unimproved?
So it's the northern portion, I believe half of it is paved. So there is currently an entrance into the alley as shown on the plat, which is that northern entrance on 4th Street towards Valley Avenue. However, I believe the development that's proposed is actually that southern entrance on 4th, closer to Atlantic. But currently today, I would say 80 or 90% of the alley is unimproved. That's correct.
All right, I'm just wondering whether there would need to be another sign where the alley intersects with the alley, if you get what I mean.
Absolutely, yeah. If the signage reflected what is currently in place, it would be one sign, I think, and one pole. In preparation for whatever configuration the alley may take, I think it would be at least 3 signs, if not 4.
Yeah. Give me a second. Homer Thomas is 2 signs. Zelda Fitchandler is 2 signs. No, you have 3. Why do you have 3?
I believe that on the southern portion where Main Avenue and M Street intersect with the designated street, there's a segment of road. There's 2 segments of roadway at the end where on the Main Street Avenue side. So there's existing signage there just south of the theater, and then the intersection at Main and M.
Yeah, I'm not going to second guess you guys, but I stood on that triangle last weekend. If I fall over, that's the entire length or width of that. But be that as it may, do you have an opinion whether it should go to the northern end of the lot or to K Street? I think you drew it to K Street.
We did demonstrate it to K Street. I think that doing it to the furthest intersection is probably more in line with how we standardly designate streets.
And then Pearl Settles. The map suggests that this is a dead end, almost like a cul-de-sac. And so you would just put one sign there, not one at the far end, at the end of the cul-de-sac?
Again, our default is to do it to the intersecting streets. So in this case, it would be 37th. I believe we would be happy to, if there is public space available at the end of the roadway, happy to install a second sign.
I think I'm more asking a question than suggesting. So I think that one of these, maybe 2 of them, I thought that maybe there need to be more signs. The others is really just more questions on my part. And the funding is sufficient, and the administration has no objection to any of these.
Correct.
I have some more questions for Ms. Freeman, but I'm going to turn to colleagues. Councilmember McDuffie, I'm told you're here.
Yes, I am. I'm just I am present.
Do you have questions?
I do have questions, and I
Well,
have
you're up.
okay. Um Thank you. I wanted to recognize all the witnesses for their testimony. Thank them for their testimony. I really appreciate them taking the time to provide it. But I also want to speak in support of the legislation and the naming of the recreation center as the Reservoir Park Recreation Center. And it is my opinion that this is an appropriate name and that it does pay homage to both the historic nature of the reservoir, which was state of the art at the time that it was constructed as a sand filtration facility. And it also pays homage to finally opening up the 25 acres as a park for use by district residents and visitors to the District of Columbia. And so when I hear testimony from people saying it should be named and have McMillan in the name, I guess I would disagree with that and recognize that the entire site is still named after Senator James McMillan, as well as the federal asset across First Street, where the Army Corps of Engineers still operates the aqueduct. And so, there are still assets in the nation's capital that recognize Senator James McMillan, and the site still recognizes Senator James McMillan. I don't think every single thing that is on the 25-acre site that the district purchased for the purpose of economic development in the late 1980s, I don't think that every asset on that site needs to recognize and be named after a senator who was born in Canada, who represented Michigan, and has no connection beyond his federal service to the District of Columbia. And so I wanted to put that on the record, Chairman, and speak in support of the bill as a council member, as an at-large council member of the District of Columbia. And if I could, also just, thinking about it as a neighbor and somebody who grew up directly across the street from the site, as somebody who's been in the city for nearly 50 years, who only as of last month was ever able to go across the street and enjoy the site for the first time, I really think that a lot of thought has been put into this by DPR, by Director Freeman, by the mayor, and I appreciate Councilmember Zachary Parker introducing the bill to name the park appropriately Reservoir Park Recreation Center. And if you look at the bill, which was introduced, you see that the name of the entire site is still named after the historic McMillan Sand Filtration site. So I'll leave it there, Chairman. I would ask that the folks who spoke in opposition to this really give consideration to the name. I think how thoughtful the name was. I've had conversations with the executive branch officials about this name, and I'm deeply in support of the name, and would ask that this bill make it to the full council for a board vote so we can all support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. I do want to note, this was not introduced by Councilmember Parker.
Oh, was it introduced by
the mayor?
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Chairman, for introducing the bill at the request of the mayor. And I stand in support of the bill.
All right. I only introduced it at the request of the mayor, which I do with all legislation or virtually all legislation introduced by the mayor or the mayor wants introduced. Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Chairman Mendelson. I wanted to direct questions to Director Freeman But first, I wanted to level set. The McMillan site has long been the focus of a lot of back and forth and contention. And now, after many years, we have a beautiful wreck that most Ward 5 neighbors are really excited about and have already put to use. The contention around the name for Senator James McMillan, who was a Republican representing Michigan, now is about the history of that gentleman. In the mayor's introduction letter, and I'm only going through this to level set, in part it reads, while the district has benefited from Senator McMillan's efforts that led to the creation of the original water reservoir, today's district cannot look past his troublesome record, which harmed thousands of minorities in the United States and its territories, that spurred additional planning, economic loss, and racial inequities, which we are still working to rectify today. The City Beautiful movement in the district, which he helped to lead, also baked in segregation and demolished African-American communities without building alternative housing. There are further examples that my team researched, including Senator McMillan's voting record focused on prohibiting people with epilepsy from immigrating to the United States, reinforcing American imperialism in the Philippines, and continuing the forced displacement of indigenous people in the United States. There are articles that my team have pulled, and I'm happy to submit on the official record, one of which by Arizona University professor that states, quote, this neoclassical movement was used to exclude people of color, women, immigrants, and the poor from public spaces, particularly civic spaces, and thus American democratic life. That was in reference to the McMillan plan. And it goes further. In terms of community engagement, I want to be clear. The mayor introduced and sent down an emergency, a temporary, and a permanent bill. It is my understanding that we're having this hearing because council policy is that, or at least the chairman's policy, is that we're going to have a hearing over the naming and only move forward with the permanent bill. I think that is fair and reasonable. I have shared that feedback with the community. And when I say the community, I'm talking about the entire Bloomingdale Stronghold community, not just members of the McMillan Advisory Group. I know we had someone testify earlier today from that group. I want to be clear that while their feedback is important, it is also important that we include the perspectives of the residents of Bloomingdale and Stronghold. And I give great weight to my colleague, Councilmember McDuffie's feedback. Where we stand now, the ANC 5E issued a resolution in support of naming the park McMillan at the request of the advisory group. There was no objection, in part because this has not, as I understand it, been a major focus of the ANC. The Civic Association issued a resolution in support of naming the Park and Recreation Center after McMillan, again, at the request of the advisory group, and because many of the facts that I just referenced weren't known. After I then engaged the Civic Association and the ANC with some of these facts, I am told that the Civic Association has declined to move forward with this matter. Put more plainly, the Civic Association, as I'm told by its chair, Chair Janine Quinn, they are fine with Reservoir Rec. They are not interested in making this a big fight nor pursuing it any further. What I have committed to doing with the community, and when I say community, I'm talking about the entire community, not just the McMillan Advisory Group, is hosting an engagement with neighbors to see, one, is this something that many neighbors really care about? And two, what are the names that neighbors would put forward? I'll end with this. My sense is that this is not a major focus for Ward 5 neighbors. Many neighbors are indifferent or fine with Reservoir Park. And as Chair Janine Quinn conveyed just today, as I reached out to her to make sure we were on the same page, this is not a matter that they are wanting to pursue any further. So with that, Director Freeman, I wanted to come to you. Can you document any feedback you've received in opposition to the naming of the recreation and park at what was formerly known as McMillan Reservoir Rec. Have you received any feedback opposing that? And if so, can you describe that to us?
To date, DC Department of Parks and Recreation has received no feedback in opposition to the name Reservoir Park Recreation Center.
Thank you. I know there was a desire to get this legislation in place before the grand opening of the rec and park. I was there. It was a beautiful day. Kudos to you and your team at DPR for delivering yet another state-of-the-art, first-class recreation facility for Ward 5 in the city. And I will continue to say Ward 5 has the best facilities in the city. What might be the impact, or is there any impact with changing the name for DPR at this stage in the game?
So yes, there would be a fiscal impact, signage that has already been created, literature, websites. And I think there's also an impact to members of the community who have done their research and their due diligence and feel that the city may be naming someone who doesn't represent its core values of inclusivity.
Thank you for that. I will just wrap up with this, and thank you for this time, Mr. Chairman. I am still committed to conducting community engagement with neighbors, and the reason for that is because I did hear from some in the McMillan Advisory Group that they were not sufficiently engaged by the mayor's team. But again, what I am hearing from community leaders and neighbors is that this is not a fight worth having, and that many people don't object to Reservoir Park. On a more fundamental level, I do think that we should scrutinize Senator McMillan's history. And I know there's a bit of a debate, and this may come up in this hearing, of whether or not he was racist. That is not for us to decide. And quite frankly, I don't think any of us can affirmatively say one way or another. What I will say is, based on my own independent research, there are things in this individual's past that give me pause, and I would not want any recreation center, monument, park, or the like to be named after somebody that could even be associated with the factual votes that were referenced. Again, voting to exclude people with epilepsy from immigrating to the United States, reinforcing American imperialism in the Philippines, and continuing the forced displacement of indigenous people in the United States. I think we could do better than that, and I will yield the rest of my time. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember. Ms. Freeman, could you describe the process that the administration went through for deciding on Reservoir?
Yes, so there was engagement with the mayor's office, with a council member from Ward 5 and the previous council member and council member at large, McDuffie. I do also know that there was some history where the DGS team did some historical fact checking on the background of the individual. And so I think the name was a consensus of all between the council members and the executive.
With all due respect, that's the best you can come up with? Because we didn't describe any community meetings, any selection process. I'm thinking, for example, DCPS will do a survey of all the families at a school. They will actually put forth a number of names in which there'll be some voting. I didn't hear any of that from you.
With all due respect, I gave you the answer best to my knowledge. If there were some other things that happened, I am not familiar. So I wasn't trying to come up with anything. I was just trying to state for the record and answer your question appropriately.
Okay, I appreciate that. In your statement, Ms. Freeman, you say problematic history of U.S. Senator James McMillan, record of racism. Is your basis for that this fact sheet that I was given today that it is attributed to DGS?
I've also done my own independent history on his voting record. And on numerous occasions, the Interior Department, Tribe Road Citizenship, Senator McMillan voted to have Native American tribes investigated every 6 months and for Native Americans to recertify. There's another, Mr. McMillan voted to buy out Indian tribes from Mississippi. That is HR 13172. There was a permit to permit Chinese entry to certain individuals. Mr. McMillan voted no to permitting Chinese people to have wholesale and commercial. That was a vote. And of course, all of these are point in time from 1897 to 1902. There was another vote, Senator McMillan voted to deporting Chinese immigrants who failed to obtain a full certificate. There were other legislation in a book titled Chocolate City, A History of Race and Democracy in the Nation's Capital. The McMillan Plan boasted a desire for their leaders to remove and forever keep from view the ugly, the unsightly, and even the commonplace. Much of the plan hinged on the removal of many slums and alleys around the Capitol and the mall to make for new public monuments and government buildings. And the gleaming vision of the new white city, the poor had no place. The McMillan Plan helped make good on a prediction that it will not be many years before the Negro shanties in the heart of the city will disappear. They were already giving way to the march of wealth and splendor. And so again, a point in time, 1897 to 1902, I cannot speak with certainty what he was or what he wasn't. I can only speak from what we believe, which was consistent with what's happening at that time. And to date, the district has moved away from any of those behaviors. Affordable housing is something that we are all profoundly proud of. Inclusivity is something that we are all profoundly proud of. At no time did it seem, based on voting record alone, that Mr. McMillan of Michigan, not South Carolina, supported DC values. Additionally, in the NPS, National Park Service Plan, the goal originally was for a bridge. This is what was brought to Senator McMillan. However, at the time, he was a millionaire. By today's standards, he would be a billionaire and was able to use his resources to create a totally different plan. And so here we are today. It does not align with the citizens. It does not align with my values or your values. And so that is our position.
You said bridge, bridge to what? From where to where?
So the original plan, they wanted to design a bridge throughout the city from one part of the city to the other. And the McMillan Plan that was presented to Senator McMillan, and he used his resources to develop the McMillan Plan, which the district has benefited from. We do not take that from the history. We're not saying that there was not benefits from what he offered. The issue is now, do we name it for someone who, by records and voting records, exhibited racist tendencies?
All right, let me say this. What we have before us here is a bill that does not have unanimous community support.
Mhm.
What I know personally is that on or about June 6th, I was told that the executive wanted an emergency bill to name the rec center without there having been any public discussion. What I know from this hearing is that there's not been the kind of public vetting with regard to selecting a name that we have seen over and over again in other situations where there's an official naming, such as for a school. And I'm guessing for other recreation centers, but I might on that be wrong because we don't do this that often for rec centers. There hasn't been that kind of public participation, but there was the effort on the part of the executive to jam the council, to jam the legislature. The legislature has to approve the name by giving us something on June 6th for dedication, which I think was that weekend. Correct me if I'm wrong. And that's completely inappropriate. I don't know that I'm troubled with the name Reservoir personally, whether I'm troubled with the name Reservoir or McMillan or some other name. I do know of some conversations that I have had with colleagues that they have thought there might be some other names that would be more desirable. I don't know that I'm of a view of that, except that I do know that as we have this hearing, I'm not aware of a community process other than what a couple of witnesses testified to, which was this Macmillan Advisory Group, which is apparently quite a number of organizations. I'm not saying that's sufficient, but that's really the only community participation in the naming that I know of, where in this instance, there is some controversy. So to move forward, the committee would like to see more of a consensus with regard to what name. I will add this as well, because we've been through this over and over again with names, and I will remember the mayor's faces report, which suggested that because of the racist history of many, maybe even most of our founding fathers, that we should actually be renaming most of our public schools and renaming many of our monuments. It was sufficiently embarrassing that that report was actually never made public other than a draft version. The fact of the matter is, and we've seen this with namings, and just glancing at Councilmember McDuffie, not to call him out, but we had an alley naming a few years ago that was controversial because there was an allegation that the name of the person was of somebody who had a, what do I want to say, did not reflect current values. It turned out, I think it was actually a misunderstanding of what person. But I see this over and over again. We want to name something after somebody. There's going to be something controversial in that person's background. We see that with George Washington. We see that with Abraham Lincoln. We even see that with former President McKinley. I only say that because apparently the imperialism, which is not a history that I'm proud of, but is a history of the United States, is associated with him. And some would say manufactured Spanish-American War, manufactured war. So if we're looking for perfection, I dare say we're not going to find it. Or if we're looking for flawlessness, I dare say we're not going to find it. I think history is important and understanding history is important. I also think it's possible to look at events and see them from different perspectives. I'm thinking, for example, the historiography with regard to the American Revolution, and was that about furthering the economics of planters, the planter society, or was it really about democracy? And you can argue it both ways. The point being, history is important, but it's also important to recognize that there are different perspectives which can be equally valid. And in any case, it's usually not flawless. But history distortion is troublesome to me, which is why I'm speaking right now on this. And I've seen that as well. So there's been some criticism of the City Beautiful movement. City Beautiful movement comes out of, if I remember correctly, the 1893 Chicago Exposition. Some would argue, although I think it's not exactly on point, that the reconstruction of the grounds around the Capitol, which as I recall was not a displacement, but was, for example, creating the grand facade that we see, which is technically the rear of the Capitol. It's facing the mall. That was all part of the City Beautiful movement, or relevant to analogous to the City Beautiful movement. We could continue with a city that continues to have a fetid canal running along B Street and a railroad station on the mall and lots of marshland, sort of where the Lincoln Memorial is, or we could have something that's more beautiful and monumental, which is what we have. Now, for example, I've seen in some of this, I think in the DGS critique or what's reported to them about the displacement of communities such as in Tenleytown, which happened decades after the senator died. And I don't recall that that was expressly called for in the Macmillan Plan, which once upon a time I actually did look through. But for example, the ring of Fort Circle Parks, that's part of the Macmillan Plan. Or the, well, not exactly the acquisition of Rock Creek Park, because that predated the Macmillan Plan, but Rock Creek Park, Glover Archwell Park, I would guess even Fort DuPont Park. This is all part of that City Beautiful or the Macmillan Plan. And I don't think those are things that we walk away from. The fact that the Federal Triangle, for example, was cleared a lot of slums, and they were slums. I'm trying to remember now. Civil War General Hooker was purportedly, I don't know if this is accurate, but it's what I've heard. Maybe it's just urban legend. The reason why prostitutes are called hookers, and they all were concentrated in part of what's now the Federal Triangle. And so we can lament that those slums were cleared, and I am sure that there was little to zero sensitivity to the people who were displaced. However, the Federal Triangle was built in the late 1920s, which was roughly 20 years after the senator died. And I dare say, although maybe I need to reread the Macmillan Plan didn't actually call for displacing communities. It simply depicted a map with parks and a more grand mall and monuments such as the Lincoln Memorial. So this is all to say, history is important. It's important to recognize that there can be equally legitimate perspectives with regard to the same events. It's also important to understand the context of the time. I would say that if you took the most egalitarian individuals of the 19th century and put them against us today in the whatever we are, the 21st century, we would say that they were racists, even though they might have been at the forefront of fighting racism. But history distortion is really troubling to me. I don't have any other questions.
Chairman?
Councilmember McDuffie, you look like you wanted to say something.
Yes, I really appreciate your statement and really, I think, contextualizing, you know, what is necessary for full consideration of this bill. I do want to state, though, that it's not my understanding that this process of significant community engagement has always accompanied the naming of a recreation center. And I think more recently in history, and I've championed this, and I've worked with you as chairman of the committee that has oversight, for the council to be more thoughtful in the consideration of measures that come from the executive or from the council for that matter, to name institutions in the District of Columbia, local DC, because we have a history in America, in the nation's capital in particular, of naming monuments and other statues being erected and other sort of significant markers in history after white people, to put it bluntly, mostly white men, to be candid. I think the council have done a great job of being more thoughtful when we consider these measures under your leadership, working with me and others who I think have raised these issues on a number of occasions, on a number of namings, be it schools, be it streets, alleys, or otherwise. And in fact, to your point, I had two bills that would put in place a process for us to be more thoughtful when we name institutions in the District of Columbia. I do want to say this, though, about the McMillan Plan and about the City Beautiful effort, which, as you pointed out, came around 1893 after the Chicago Exposition, that those things were happening in a time in America when most of our institutions were still run by white males. And in many cases, wealthy white males on the federal side of things. And Congress was represented by white males, right? And so this was post-Civil War, to be sure, but it was also post-Reconstruction and pre-Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, pre-Fair Housing Act. And a lot of our cities were still segregated, as well as the District of Columbia during that time, and our federal government. And so I think it's important just to make sure that people understand why we are visiting these issues over and over again, even still in 2024. And what I'll end with, Chairman, is that I think in this instance, as chair of the committee, we should be careful about how much we're asking when, let me say that differently, because I think we always should be asking the tough questions and taking the executive to task about the engagement process. But in this case, we're not talking about something that the executive has proposed to name after an individual. Quite the opposite. And I want to recognize the mayor and her team at DPR, DGS for this. They've decided to propose a name that does not include an individual, but yet recognizes the history around the site. I think, that the engagement process perhaps could have been more extensive. I will say that I reached out to several current residents and former residents of Stronghold, longtime original, as we call them, Stronghold residents, to speak with them about the name, and they spoke in support of the Reservoir Park Recreation Center name. And so I want to make sure that the record for the committee reflects that there was some engagement of the community beyond what the executive did. I did my own engagement, particularly in Stronghold, and I appreciated Councilmember Parker's reference to his conversation with the Bloomingdale Civic Association President Terry Janine Quinn. I've also engaged India Luckett as president of the Stronghold Civic Association, and she wants to have further conversation about this specific name because I'm not quite sure she understood some of the history around Senator James McMillan or anything beyond what was presented by the McMillan Advisory Group chairperson. So I wanted to say that, Chairman, I wanted to thank you for having this hearing. I wanted to thank you for providing that context and for working with me over the years on issues as it pertains to our efforts to be more thoughtful about how we name institutions, markers, symbols that represent local Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you. Give me just a second. I'm about to close this out, but I'm told you want to say something else?
Yes, I wanted to correct the record. There was emails sent to the ANCs in March, in April, and in May. And so regarding the community engagement, I just wanted to note that and make sure that I added that to the record. That's it. And I also wanted to shout out Councilmember McDuffie's shirt. It was absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there was a conflict of interest there, but it only says DP. All right, stop trying to show off your six-pack. I'm going to close out this hearing. This has been a hearing on, I believe it's 9 measures related to naming streets or alleys, actually no streets, alleys or, that's not correct, streets or alleys or in one case, a public building officially or symbolically. The record in this matter will be open for 2 weeks. It will close at 5 p.m. on Friday, July 26, 2024. The time is 11:43